next one. Let me know if I'm going too fast. And last one. Okay. Some of those quotes are pretty intense. How's everybody feeling? Which ones stood out to you?
This is Adrielle. I am really struggling with having a dual mind, being about community as well as personal interest. And I just want to put that out there to be completely transparent, because one of the challenges, my son is in a dual language school. And I feel the concern that if you're in a school that's good and you want your kids have a community and they're offered some resource, you know, a dual language or a science track or robotics or whatever the focus is, these changes making you have to consider becoming a part of a system to get that again, like having to jump through hoops. Now you got to go in a lottery where it was just neighborhood. Now you have to do all these things. I mean, it's frustrating, right? Like my son has two cousins and an aunt who are Japanese, but I'm having to worry about whether or not my son would get into an immersion program so he can speak with them at home. I mean, this is, you know, it could be Spanish, it could be whatever else. And so that stood out for me. And like I said, I'm just struggling with trying to reconcile my personal interests with the larger community interests. But at this point, there don't seem to be very many differences. I mean, most of those I could feel for one reason or another.
And your personal experiences are important as well. So it's important to share those, and that's the perspective through which you come to the table, and that has value. So so I think it's natural to feel that, right? I mean, we all have a wider perspective here, but yet there are very personal implications to the effects of this change.
I think not any one of those specifically, but taken in aggregate, there's definitely a distrust of this concept coming up every few years of let's go and rebalance and address our race problems, and nothing coming out of it. So, I have a document from 2014 where they're talking about this same thing in focus option reviews, and nothing was done then either. So I think what we're hearing here is these families saying, we're watching nothing get done. Why should we do anything about it now? We could just wait and see if nothing happens, or complain when we move schools. So I don't think we've seen the other shoe drop, as far as the communities are involved. And what sounds like from the beginning part of our meeting is we've done a very poor job of getting outreach, and that maybe we need to refocus our efforts on getting the news to the people before getting the people into new schools.
Yeah, it was a very challenging time for outreach. I think we need to do better. Of course, COVID unfortunately did present some hurdles for the in-person meetings, which some of these communities we were told would be more willing to talk to us if they were able to meet with us in person. So that was, we were all very disappointed we weren't able to get a better turnout at these sessions.
And is there any chance to revisit that now that people are back in school? That there's now central places for people to meet or to talk or reach out or to advertise that this is even happening?
I think that's a really good question. I know there's the timeline, right? That's part of this, that we have to be able to provide recommendations to the board within a certain time period. But originally, that was our goal, to be able to complete listening and learning at this point and share that feedback before we start developing scenarios. But I think in reality, what it might have to be is, we start with developing scenarios, but then maybe it's kind of an interim presentation of that feedback, right? So if it continues, it's just happening as sort of a back and forth, instead of, okay, before we even start talking scenarios at all, we're going to have our listening, learning done. So yeah, it's just a little bit different approach.
So what happens if we miss our deadline, right? Like if we don't have the buy-in or the visibility that we need to make truly informed decisions, is there not an opportunity to maybe push back that deadline, give it some more time? I mean, what are the issues that would arise that make this such a drawn line in the sand?
That's a very good question. Yeah, and I ideally someone from the district maybe should address it, but my understanding is that we need to be able to have a plan in place prior to the budgeting process, right? So that's kind of the hard deadline that we face. Once they start talking, having those budgeting discussions, they have to be able to know what the approach is going to be in order to do that effectively.
Maybe I can add a little bit to that. So I think there is a critical moment when a decision has to be made, and I think there would be kind of, if we can't hit that deadline for, I would guess, fairly soon after the new year, you miss opportunities to create a robust staffing plan, so that for example, at my school at Lane, if the recommendation to increase enrollment came later in the spring, we would miss hiring waves that would mean that we would have much less access to staff to fill positions. And so I think there's a pretty firm timeline if the decisions could be made for the coming school year. And so if there were a decision to put it off, I think it would have to be for a year, not for just some months, because we'd be kind of out of that budgeting and hiring cycle that is so critical to building a strong program.
Thank you,
And I always think about how middle school is only a 3-year, the kids are only in there for 3 years. So another 1 year delay for those kids. We ended phase one with a pretty big imbalance between some middle schools being very crowded and overcrowded and others being quite under enrolled. And while there's some things that can be done creatively to make sure that kids are getting equitable experiences, it's, we're trying to balance this to get more kids access to a more robust experience.
I think it's probably worthwhile to understand that if we waited a year, I know we're not going to, I tried this last time too. If we waited a year, yes, the experience is hard for, the kids who are going to lose 1 year of their middle school experience, but isn't it better for the next 10 or 15 years of, getting this right rather than coming back and doing it every couple of years?
Yeah, I will say though, that I entered this process when I had a kindergartner and a second grader with the expectation that that this would happen before they were out of elementary school. And now they're both in a very overcrowded middle school and this won't be done before I have a high schooler. So, it sort of leads to that distrust you were talking about, Josh, where it's like, we've been saying we're going to do this for how many years now? And so we've created this vicious cycle where people don't believe it's really going to happen, or people don't believe that their voices are important or going to be taken into consideration. And so it's harder to get people to engage. And then people feel I don't know what the answer is. I know that some of the feedback that I feel like we've been hearing for years is that, I'll speak to my own personal experience here. My kids went to Abernathy Elementary School. This first round of DBRAC, when I was first involved several years ago, it's like the feedback that we would get from a lot of the more privileged communities was, what's the rush? Let's wait. It's interesting because it's sort of the opposite of maybe what's happening now, where we really need to hear the voices of our BIPOC community members, and we're not. And so the request to think about waiting is to make sure that we have those voices that are so essential but it's like that message was always the one coming from the more privileged communities before, of like, we're not in any hurry, let's wait. And then you'd have people coming whose schools were less resourced, and they were saying, we can't wait. We've lost too many years already. We need to make sure that this gets an equitable solution so my kids' needs are getting met. So I
think that puts us in this boat, right? Because then we go, oh man, you've complained 3 years in a row. I'm going to quick rip off the Band-Aid for you right here. We're going to shove Cruston into Kellogg and just call it good. It's the same exact result, where the knee-jerk reaction is going to cause this process to happen again soon.
Yeah, and I know that was one of the themes that came out of our last session was, we need to look beyond Band-Aid solutions, right? And take the time to develop something that is enduring and addresses the core problems. But interesting.
I wish I had more answers than complaints, but I do want to be a support here, and I want to be a facilitator and help things move forward. I don't want to just be standing up for my community or, where my kids are. I want what's best for everybody, and I will try to come up with more solutions than complaints, but I'm trying to highlight where I see things that don't always make sense towards our end goal.
Absolutely. No. And your feedback's very important. And I know you're very thoughtful and considering all of this, and really appreciate your authenticity and your willingness to share. So thinking of then the development of scenarios and knowing that we are approaching that stage, I've heard that pretty loud and clear that, there's a need for additional feedback, right, from BIPOC community members, that we continue to do some type of outreach and bring more voices to our deliberations. What are some other things that can inform our development and refinement of scenarios based on what we've heard, so far in the listening and learning sessions?
One of the quotations that stood out to me, or a couple that sort of synthesizing, was the idea that just changing a boundary is not enough. And that making sure that kids have the same opportunities, and that we're partnering those changes in enrollment patterns or school locations or boundary lines with an equitable set of resources and an equitable educational experience, regardless of where you live or what program you choose to attend or all those things, so that it doesn't feel like if things change for you that you're losing out.
Mhm. So there's a series of changes that accompany those adjustments, and that equates to maybe adding programs, maybe adding even, after school enrichment activities, liaisons, different resources at those schools to provide additional supports. So the district can ensure an equitable educational experience for all kids, regardless of where they attend. Any other thoughts? What about, I thought it was interesting, the feedback on, because one of the questions we asked was, what's more important, proximity or programs? And we heard pretty loud and clear that felt like that was kind of an unfair question, because it is easier for those of a privileged background to be able to make that choice, whereas others that are marginalized communities can't always have access to the same transportation resources. So that, it was something that really stood out to me in listening to the sessions.
So can I just say something really fast? I'm just here typing, I'm prefacing and typing as fast as I can. So please let me know if I write something down that doesn't convey the feedback that you're trying to let us know.
Oh, no worries. And we're recording also just for our own reference here. And so
yeah, absolutely.
Just follow up with that. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your notes.
Feel free to put in the chat if there's something that you want me to put on a sticky on the board. I can just put that in if you don't feel like getting off mute, but just let me know and I'm happy to ping that in.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes. The chat's always another way to convey some feedback to us.
I guess maybe my next question, just to be another squeaky wheel. How do we balance proximity with the neighborhood programs when we place DLI in certain schools? So then to keep cohorts together, we talked about last time getting into Kellogg, all the kids from Atkinson are not going to go to Kellogg. They're going to go to Harrison Park. Mm-hmm. So they're going to walk past this school or be driven past the school they've been getting built for the last 5 years. And it's not their neighborhood school, even though it's their neighborhood. Like, how do we start to balance out the prioritization of DLI versus the proximity and the rich neighborhood aspects of things?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question. Yeah. What do people think? Welcome back, everyone. All right. So given the data, thinking about enrollment issues at your own child's or children's schools, what are you aware of? What are some things impacting your child's experience there? Is there overcrowding? Do you have situations where perhaps there are classrooms being used for non-instructional purposes, to accommodate, say, community programs or even administrative space? Tell me what you're experiencing. Or underutilization of spaces?
I think I'm going to abstain from this question because my son is in online learning right now.
Okay.
And so I have no clue what the actual school is looking like right
Mhm. Yeah, and it's sort of a weird time, right? Like with COVID and everything, where there are a lot of kids that are still doing comprehensive distance learning. Yeah.
It's interesting, this is my third year as a Hosford parent, and I really don't have a sense of what it is like this year. When my older child was in 6th grade, and that was prior to COVID, that was the year that was interrupted. And that year, it was a like unexpected bump in the number of 6th grade students that were incoming, and there was not additional staffing that was given. And so the principal at that time sort of protected the small class sizes in the 6th graders for the 6th graders. And that meant that the 7th and 8th graders had very large class sizes that year. And then I don't know now that they're back. There hasn't been any communication about issues like that. So I'm assuming that with the reduced return to school, that the overcrowding hasn't been as much of an issue at Hosford this year.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I think I'd want to emphasize both of the last two comments in response to like how hard it is even to get feedback from families, because two-thirds of the parents that have kids at my school this year really are just wanting to know more about the school and don't have that background to say what is the enrollment, what's the experience there. And so our current 8th graders had some months at school, and everyone else is really new to the building. So I think we're building awareness, and we're building community and connection and sharing information, but that sense of what the school is like and what the concerns or issues are, I think it's also new that there isn't that level of awareness.
I think, and I wonder, Michael, Beth, and others, if part of it also is the challenge of, because of COVID, parents probably aren't allowed in the building as freely as they normally would be, right? For kind of in-person events or back to school nights, where they might get a better sense of what's happening in the building if they were able to visit it, but they're kind of being kept at the door just for the health and safety reasons, which are important, but maybe have less awareness of what's going on inside the building. Is that true? Yeah, I see nods. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. And I think there's just general, but when I try to talk about enrollment balancing with my community, I think there's confusion because there seem to be so many more pressing and pertinent topics to really be talking about at this point.
Yeah.
So I think we just don't have the kind of feedback on these topics that we would want, because we're really digging into just building a school community, getting to know each other, and getting back to the school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Natasha, raising your hand.
Yeah, hi again. I just want to make sure that I'm capturing everybody's notes, so please feel free to correct me if needed, and or put something in the chat so that I can make sure that I'm gathering what everybody's saying correctly.
Yeah, and I can, we are going to have a Miro tutorial. I don't think we're going to do that tonight, but for those of you that are familiar with Miro, I can put the Miro address in the chat. And those that you've had, I know some of you maybe even had a chance to work with Marnie in that. So if you wanted to even add things, you're welcome to do so. Kind of navigate your way to our Columbia box. So Michael, I was going to ask, because I know your school, you have kind of a different situation where you have a lower enrollment, right? You probably have some empty spaces. What are the no. Well, tell me about that, like how you're filling your facility and what your spaces are being used for.
Right. Yeah, we are co-located with Access Academy. So we are people laugh at me looking at closets as potential office space for staff, because we have what would normally be a community and family room as the classroom this year. I've got teachers moving on planning periods from room to room. We have zero space. We're cheek to cheek with another school in our building right now. And they were scheduled to move at mid-year, and now I think the plan is to move over the summer. So next year we'll have space to expand. Right now we are absolutely overloaded.
And so, well, we're thinking about overcrowded conditions, what students are most impacted? Question for everybody. Just based on your experience and.
So my kids also went to an overcrowded elementary school. And I will say that I feel like one of the areas that was always a struggle was students who needed additional support. And if there was students that needed to work with specialists, there was nowhere for them to go. They would be out in either the hallway, which was really distracting, or in the cafeteria, which was loud and echoey. And small group work, there was never any like good place to go and do that. So that seems like some of the kids who maybe were most negatively impacted by the overcrowding. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, and kind of touches on the comment we heard last time, or several comments about like the goal of being able to provide differentiated instruction, right? Like if you don't have the spaces to be able to do that, then that's a tough thing to accomplish.
Or, you know, I mean, even just when kids are all in the classroom together and you've got one teacher, it's the ones who there's just less opportunity for individual attention for any of the kids. And then that most would be, I would imagine, most negatively impacting those who need the extra support too.
Mm-hmm. So with the data that was presented, was there anything in particular that surprised you? I mean, were you guys surprised that some of those forecasted enrollment numbers were in many cases less than expected?
I would say, I think I was initially surprised we were looking at the numbers at all, because it's like trying to base decisions on one anomaly. Like, you know, we can't base anything on what kids are going through right now. You know, but it was nice to see that it was acknowledged and that we're going to use the forecast in order to try to give ourselves the best, you know, going forward. So I would say the most shocking thing out of that was that we were looking at it, but that was quickly dispelled.
Yeah, I know it's so hard to base big decisions on what's going on right now because we are in such a transitory time,
huh? That parallel, I know there were a few exceptions, but the parallel between some of the higher income schools having larger or having less kids return, I think that was something that was initially, a friend of mine had mentioned that to me a while ago, which was initially surprising to me, but then makes perfect sense because a lot of those families, there might be families more likely to have resources for, you know, taking care of their kids' education at home, or more flexible work schedules or whatever it might be. And that makes me, like somebody mentioned, really wonder, once the vaccine is available for kids under 12, are we going to see this huge surge of those families coming back even within this school year? And it's, yeah, I don't know.
I think it would be interesting to know how many students have opted out, like said, no, we're not coming in, we're letting you know we're not coming, versus families that have moved. Because you know, every house around me is almost flipped. You know, people are they're tired of the way the city is running and they're taking their kids and getting out of here. You know, there may not be a rebound in some areas because people have just moved. It'd be interesting to see how that impacts this.
Yeah, and they say, you know, because now, you know, things are changing where more employers are open to the idea of employees working remotely, and, you know, people moving away from more expensive cities into like rural areas where the cost of living might be less. And yeah, that trend's been viewed other places as well.
And it lines up with the affluence of seeing the schools without the rebound, right? Those are the parents that could also, you know, drop their property and go somewhere.
I do want to point out that at Harrison Park, a lot of the neighboring homes tend to be rentals. And so what you see is families either choosing to move out of district. I've seen that where they're taking their kids to what they consider a better school, a better middle school. Or if they, you know, can't pay the rent, they have to move, they get evicted. That happens too. So.
Thank you, Michelle. When you say with the families that choose to go to another school, are they then, you know, you mean like buying a house and then and their house that they have in the Harrison Park attendance area, they convert that to a rental?
No, I'm saying like they have an apartment and they move apartments to like Gresham, David Douglas,
Out of,
Vancouver. So you're moving to, you have more kind of mobility than just if you own a home, then you have to sell your home, you have to buy another home. You know, it's they're choosing to enroll their kids in schools that they think are better.
Mhm. You keeping up, Natasha?
I'm trying.
So, so how does this shape our thinking about the enrollment and program balancing and the creation of scenarios?
I was just gonna say, I wish I could see the document because that was a lot to try and take in a flash, but with Kellogg, it's even with, you know, without the bump that we were sort of leaving a cushion for, I believe it's still at right in that 90% capacity or range. And so like, while we've got a pretty significant drop in some of the elementary schools, thinking about, wow, our middle schools still are pretty high up there. And if those kids in the elementary schools are coming back once things are feeling more stable, we really have some work to do still. And so I like that we're still thinking about the previous enrollment numbers and thinking about where to go.
Yeah, thank you, Beth.
I wasn't clear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't clear on the color coding. What the orange and the yellow and the red and the green on that.
So I think it just refers to the severity of the difference. And so red means that they underestimated the number of kids that would be enrolled. Sorry, opposite, that they overestimated, I apologize, overestimated the number of kids that would be enrolled. And then green is that they underestimated. So so for example, if you can see my screen right now, is that right? Yeah.
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 Okay, good. So just to take like Richmond, for example, the forecasted, where is it? Sorry, the actual enrollment versus the preliminary enrollment versus the forecast. So there was, you know, a few different instances here, and there are 58 fewer students that enrolled than were anticipated, or 9.5% less students than they had forecast originally for that school year.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's not really very shocking to me considering where we're at right now. I think if we were not sort of trying to rebound from a really severe year last year, I might be a little bit less, I don't know, normal. I mean, it's just normal. It's expected to me, I guess.
And that it could just be kind of a temporary thing. And then,
Yeah, for the under enrollment. Like I would, I guess say that I'm probably shocked that there are any any schools that really exceed significantly, just because it's a really tough time for parents right now.
Yeah, and everyone's making individual decisions based on their circumstances and resources.
I do want to say, I just think it's great that McDaniel's enrollment is increasing, and it's such a beautiful building and a vibrant community. And that just makes me really pleased to see that uptick.
Yeah, one of the smaller high schools. Okay. Is there any enrollment data that you would like to have in your possession, before talking about the scenarios? And of course, this will be something that we'll get more hands-on with, at the next meetings. But what questions come up for you when you look at this data? And Josh,
I always,
already, yeah.
I always want to know building capacity
Mm-hmm.
along with this. So
It's hard to, have the perspective of how overcrowded the facility is with that, just knowing the enrollment and not knowing what the capacity is. Huh?
yeah, and then and I know this is part of the data dashboard, but having that toggle where we can look at the 5-year prediction too, and so that can sort of help us at least think about what we might be looking at after rebounding from the COVID stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It would also be interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Josh.
Given along with those capacity numbers, what the school rebuild schedules will look like, because we're going to be shifting kids from school to school during rebuilds of each of these. And I know they're pretty much all slated for it. So understanding how it'll impact these communities if we move them from one school to another and then rebuild the school we just moved them to, adding that in.
So when they go, say if they are going to a swing school during construction and then coming back again, yeah.
I think for me, it's class size. I want to know when you're looking at these numbers and these forecasts, what's the class size that you're anticipating? And is that optimal, right? Are you stuffing kids into classes, 28, 30 kids per class? Or is this, are we thinking about creating a reasonable, manageable class size for the teachers? I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because one thing that we've talked about off and on is like number of strands. So it's kind of like how many, and this would go along with the class size thing, because you can see a number where it's like, 350 kids or 450 kids or whatever. But if you don't know, so like how many classes per grade level that is, then because when you get in that in between where it's like we have enough kids for 1.5 classrooms at each grade level, or 2.5 or whatever it might be, then in order to have reasonable class sizes, you have to do weird things or blending or different things like that. So I think the strand data would be helpful for thinking about just like logistically, what does this number of kids look like in that building? How many first grade classrooms are there?
Yeah,
and the grade level enrollment maybe along with that.
And that that does fluctuate year to year, but maybe having an idea of like sometimes you have larger cohorts that move through or smaller cohorts, and so how those actually move through the schools.
Right.
I think that's it. Thank you all so much. I appreciate all the feedback.